Hi, my name is Dylan Tonight, and I'm here to talk about human trafficking and its effects on globalization. Human trafficking is the buying and selling of human beings into slavery, most commonly for sexual exploitation. When broken down to its simplest state, human trafficking is just another example of supply and demand made easier by technological advances and directly related to international trade. Human trafficking is not only a result of globalization, but it's also part of the process itself. Human trafficking is important to the study of globalization because it not only shows the negative effects globalization can have, but it also shows the positive global outcomes of something incredibly tragic, which is why I chose to study it. There are a lot of disciplines that can be used to explore human trafficking, but the three I found most important are economics, history, and gender studies. These three disciplines not only show the effect of globalization, but they show the effect on one another. The economy has a huge effect on the targets and the approach of traffickers. In poor areas, victims are approached with the promise of a better life and agree to begin anew with traffickers in hopes for a brighter future. The map shows the world based on the amount of trafficking. From what you could see, higher wealth areas tend to be in Tier 1, which is low trafficking, where poorer areas are on the watch list, or in Tier 3, which is higher trafficking. These tiers represent trafficking activity from low to high. While exploring the relationship between globalization and trafficking, I came across an interesting article called Globalization and Child Labor, Review of the Issues by Erica Polkoff. And in it, she says that the economic globalization has led to a form of global apathy and a corresponding emergence of a new fourth world, populated by millions of homeless, incarcerated, impoverished, and otherwise socially excluded people. This fourth world she speaks of is a perfect hunting ground for traffickers because it's filled with easy prey trying to escape their current situations. Also, on the topic of economics is the most rudimentary principle of the discipline, and when boiled down to basics, all human trafficking is another business, and therefore follows the principle of supply and demand. Due to this, there's a never-ending cycle, which traffickers explore different ways to sell their product because there's a higher demand, and as business grows, more and more customers come out of the woodwork. The largest boost in sales came with the advancement of technology, most specifically the internet. Due to the World Wide Web, traffickers are now able to sell to customers all over the world from the safety of their evil villain dungeons, or really wherever they're living nowadays, which sadly is probably just in normal houses or apartments or right down the street, and you would never know the difference. The growth in technology has increased most business sales, and human trafficking is definitely included in this. So because of technology, buying and selling a slave is readily available to mostly anyone with internet access and a credit card. And because the poor economic areas, there's a huge pool of victims who are easily coaxed into a life of slavery. These impoverished areas include a lot of women and children who cannot support themselves due to the economic climate of their homeland, and because a whopping 38% of victims are sold into sex slavery, poor women and children are targeted heavily. While exploring this with gender studies, one of the most important things I've learned is the effect the global view of women has on trafficking. It is common for women to be seen as sex objects, even in more advanced societies. Beer commercials, movies, video games tend to be filled with mostly naked women, and this is because it appeals to an audience, and women are seen as sexual objects. On a much more severe scale, human trafficking plays into this. Even in the United States, and we're in the lowest tier of trafficking, there's still prostitution, there's still kidnappings of people sold all over the world, and there are people who purchased human slaves or sex slaves. In Migration, Prostitution, and Trafficking in Women, an overview, Vincenzo Maschini discusses why women are targeted and how countries should be dealing with the situation. He mentions that the best way for fighting trafficking and abduction is to educate women on tactics of traffickers. So to fight human trafficking with intelligence. One of the best ways to educate is obviously with facts, and it's impossible to show the whole story without a historical view. From a historical standpoint, we can see how slavery has evolved with globalization. Historically, slavery has existed for a very long time and has adapted to keep up with other changes in the world. Obviously, America experienced its own influx of slavery in the 18th and 19th centuries, which was later abolished thanks to the Civil War and the fight for human rights. During this time, slave owners saw blacks as less than people who could be bought and sold. Though our laws have since gotten rid of slavery in the US and have also established equal rights for all, legal slavery still exists in the form of trafficking. And from human trafficking to human rights, Reframing Contemporary Slavery, Austin Choi Fitzpatrick shows the relationship between different forms of slavery throughout history. it's easy to see that slavery has been around forever and has changed throughout history. During the Roman Empire, slaves were owned for many reasons, but most well known is for being gladiators and fighting to the death. As mentioned before, American slavery occurred when boats of Africans were brought over for the purpose of unpaid labor, and now human trafficking targets mostly the impoverished and commonly women. In all of these cases, those who are targeted are ones who are considered at that point in history to be less than others. As beliefs change, so do the targets of slavery. This is important when exploring fighting human trafficking, because noticing patterns can help with prevention. Obviously, there's no advocacy for the process of human trafficking, but that doesn't go to say that the act does not have an effect positively on globalization. Human trafficking tends to take slaves out of their country of origin and sell them to different countries. This leads to illegal immigration, but immigration nonetheless, and the sharing of cultures. Human trafficking has also affected the way law enforcement deals with the situations across the globe, forcing cooperation between laws in different countries. So because of human trafficking and other illegal selling, usually drugs, there has been a more cooperation between different countries and their laws. It's also helped the expediting process. Globalization in many ways is a positive thing for our world, but we must remember no good comes without bad. Human trafficking is just another one of the many downsides of globalization, included with increased crime across borders. Thanks to the widespread of the internet, it is easier than ever for traffickers to make sales all over the world, increasing supply and demand and leading to misery for those sold into slavery. Globalization and human trafficking are weaved together in what seems to be an unbreakable bond, but education is a way of fighting this and hopefully severing them for good.